there.
Great.
So here it's coming up now. Can you see it?
Oh, yes, I can see it right now. Perfect. Yeah, looks great, Ben.
Okay.
And if you want me to, I can just do a quick introduction like we did before.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. Let me see here. And it looks like we are going live on Facebook as we speak.
And
Yay.
if you want me to, I can just do a quick introduction.
There it is. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on Facebook Live. This is our virtual office hour with Ben Sherman. Just wanted to share a little bit about the FPF Resilience webinar series. This series has been created and developed to continue our work to enhance the business and entrepreneurial skills of Native artists and cultural bearers, as well as expand our virtual community during these rapidly changing times. Bi-weekly, this webinar series, First Peoples Fund and our nationally recognized Native Arts Professional Development Trainers, or NAPD trainers, deliver values-based, topic-focused webinars on Mondays, followed by technical assistant office hours on Wednesdays, which is today, to follow up and answer any questions regarding the Monday webinar. And for the rest of the month of June, we have on June 15th and 16th, we have Koloku Holt, focusing on artist negotiations. And on June 29th and July 1st, we have Robert Martinez with his topic on protecting your online images. Some other FPF related virtual events coming up through our organization is that we have a Rolling Res Arts. We are excited to kick off the first events of its virtual art celebration. The Rolling Res Arts program is dedicated to bringing folks in Indian country and surrounding communities the expertise and disciplines of artists within the First Peoples Fund family. And this time it will be on virtual platforms. For more information about the Rolling Res Visual Art Celebration, as well as what's going on here with our Resilience webinar series, please check out our Facebook page and our events, as well as our FPF website for further information. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we start with this virtual webinar. This is a recorded webinar which will be available within 24 hours of the webinar concluding on our YouTube page, as well as it's staying on our Facebook page. For anybody that would be on Zoom, please keep yourself muted, and anybody that's on Facebook Live, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to add it to the comments section, and I can share them with Ben as soon as I'm able. For those who are taking part on Facebook Live or on Zoom, we do have a real quick couple-minute survey through SurveyMonkey that just helps us be able to improve the content that we're sharing with our tribal partners out there. So if you have a second to fill it out, that would be great. And I will be sharing all of these resources and the survey in both Zoom and on Facebook Live for everybody to have access to. So great. That covers everything on my end, Ben. So to start off our virtual office hour with Ben Sherman, here is Ben Sherman.
Okay, thank you very much, Hillary. For those of you who don't know me, I come from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, and I have been working with First Peoples Fund just about since its first existence. So I'm going to start this by kind of recapping a little bit about the 1 hour webinar that we did on Monday, titled The Value of Values, as you see here, but I won't be going through the PowerPoint completely, just parts of it. And I wanted to tell you some of the origin story of values, not only at First Peoples Fund, but on a much broader level. Values have been a big part of tribal and indigenous traditions for a long, long time. And I will touch on that a little bit. That's not part of the original PowerPoint, but I'll just discuss it right now. When we talk about these tribal traditions, we're talking about traditions that are still, have been handed down for many generations and are still with the tribes today. They're practiced in ceremonies and other means. And I'll give you an example. the Navajo people, the Dene, they have a concept, a tradition called Hojo. You may have heard of that. And it's all about harmony, order, balance, relationships, beauty. They have a saying called living in beauty that you may have heard of, and that represents a condition under which the tribe has come together with all of their values and their ceremonies to create a condition of harmony, not only among themselves, but individually. So Hojo is still a very respected tradition today among the Navajo people. And the people are expected to know the meaning of Hojo and to support it on an individual level to attain this harmony and balance that we're talking about within the tribal nation. And it involves a variety of values that support it. And we won't go into all of those individual values, but the primary lesson here is about maintaining harmony and balance within the tribal nation and also in the world and in the universe that they know or that they knew back at that time. So that's the Navajo and their practice of values. And something similar, very similar with the Cherokee all across the other side of the nation. Eastern Band of Cherokee is where I learned this tradition. It's called Tohi. And Tohi is also about harmony and balance and wellness and peace. And it is even incorporated into a greeting that they had when they would meet another person. They would say Tohitsu, which meant wellness to you or peace to you. So those two concepts, Navajo and Eastern Cherokee, are very, very similar. The Cherokee had a strong emphasis on relationships in their value system. And those relationships had to do with, first of all, oneself, a relationship with yourself, knowing yourself, and practicing these values yourself. And then the next level of relationships has to do with your spouse and your immediate family, and then moving on up to the extended family, to the community, to the tribal nation, and to the neighboring nations, and also to Mother Earth, and also the relationship to the Great Spirit, the Creator. Now, I failed to mention that the Hojo was similar as well, also a relationship with their Creator. So you can see that these value systems reached many levels within the traditional tribal communities. And in my culture, the Lakota people, we had a value system called Oglala Lakota. Oglala Lakota, again, was about balance and peace and harmony and living what was called a sacred life. And that is not practiced very real widely in our culture, but there are many that still do practice it. They conduct the ceremonies, they do sacred journeys, and otherwise support the value system represented by Oglala Lakota. So those are three examples that have very similar goals and objectives for having those value systems going way back in time. And not only among the native people were these value systems held and respected, but among Christian communities over in Europe and the Middle East and the Far East. In fact, the Greeks had a value system that they supported, and that was adopted eventually by the Christians. the various Christian denominations and churches. And they came up with an actual list, which still exists today. And some of you who are Christians, you may have heard of it. It refers to the 7 cardinal sins. And that's because the Christians, have this guilt system, and they focus a lot on sins and confessions and things like that. And I know that because I was formerly a Christian in another life. And those 7 cardinal sins are envy. And the counter to envy is the good value is kindness. And another one called gluttony. And the opposite of gluttony would be abstinence. Another called greed and avarice is cardinal sins. And the opposite to that is what they call liberality. And I don't even have a definition of what they meant by that. Their top cardinal sin, though, was pride and vanity, being a vain person. That was what they called the mother of all sins. And the opposite to that would be humility, practicing humility as opposed to having the sin of pride. And there were a couple more here, sloth, which is laziness and so on, and wrath, which is hate and anger. And of course, the opposite of hate and anger and wrath is patience and tolerance. So, there's ancient cultures, not only here on Turtle Island, but around the world, that paid close attention to these virtues and values. They call the contrary values over in Greece and in the early Christian societies, they call them the 7 contrary values because they worked in contrary to the sins. So there you go, all about virtues and values going way back in time. And my position here and the position of First Peoples Fund through the Native Artist Professional Development courses is to pay close attention to those values and virtues because they serve to benefit your own life as an artist and a culture bearer in quite a number of ways. And that is the point that we made in the webinar on Monday when we talk about the value of having those values. They do benefit you in your own life. Let me just say on this cover page here for the slides, we have Anna Brown Ahlers in the center of the picture, a community spirit honoree going back a number of years. She's a Tlingit from Juneau, Alaska. And it took her about 2 or 3 years, maybe even more than that, to make this huge, beautiful woven piece. And part of the ingredients of this piece is goat hair. The white goats that live way high in the mountains up there in Alaska. And Anna collects the goat hair. She's been at it for so long that people in the territory know that Anna collects goat hair for her art. So she is often given goat hair from people who hunt or maybe otherwise find goat hair, whether it's stuck to bushes or things like that out in the wilds. So this is Anna Brown Ahlers. We're going to quickly go through this graphic here. We talk about being a well-rounded artist or culture bearer, and that piece in the middle is supposed to be the well-rounded artist, but it looks like the well-rounded Ben Sherman since I've been in isolation here next to my refrigerator for quite a long time. That's how I'm getting to look. But the values, they are combined with other character traits that you have to give you this well-rounded personality and character that we're talking about here. Not only the values that we presented, but also a separate set of character traits and a separate set of skills and abilities that you, the artist, carry with you. And we'll say a little bit about that. I cannot say anything more without talking about Jennifer Easton, who was the founder of First Peoples Fund over 20 years ago. And this is a very generous person, well-grounded in values herself. She had been trying for quite some time, perhaps years, to find ways to benefit Native artists, Native communities, and not all of them were working very well until she came upon this idea of developing something like the First Peoples Fund. And she hired Lori Poyer as the president of the organization and put together First Peoples Fund 20 some years ago. And here we are still going today. Unfortunately, Jennifer passed away a few short years ago, but she certainly left a legacy of her philanthropy. So we thank her still yet today. These are some of the First Peoples Fund core values that we talked about. And they're almost universal values because you find these among so many indigenous groups and cultures, not only here on Turtle Island in the Americas, but around the world. Generosity, respect, strength, humility. The one that is unique to First Peoples Fund that we talk about seemingly more than anyone else is collective spirit. And that comes from the vision and mission of First Peoples Fund, where First Peoples Fund talks about collective spirit and actually defines it within the mission statement that you can see here. And of course, it is about supporting your community, benefiting your community. A few years ago, Hillary Clinton wrote a book called It Takes a Village. And even though we may not always support Hillary Clinton, she was correct. It does take a village to sustain and support your community and to have successful community members. So collective spirit is something new to us. Now, First Peoples Fund Native Artists Professional Development, NAPD curriculum is very extensive. 2-day course, actually it could be even more than 2 days. If we wanted to take our time at it, it could take as many as 3 or 4 days to do this course, but we squeeze it into 2 days. And you'll notice at the top of the graphic here, vision and values. We spend quite a bit of time on that right up front because that is the foundation for a lot of the things that we're asking of you during this curriculum and during your artist's career. It forms a basis of your artist statement and how you develop your own relationship with other people, such as your own community, your own extended family, galleries, and other people in your network. So and then we went on to describe how some of our leaders in the world feel about values. And this is a little part of a statement that President Barack Obama made just about 3-4 weeks ago when he addressed high schools throughout the country in a commencement speech where he referred to values. He didn't tell these graduates where to go or what to do with their education or anything like that, but he stressed the values. And you see them there: honesty, hard work, responsibility, fairness, generosity, and respect. Those sound familiar, don't they? And then another world leader, highly respected world leader from New Zealand, Jacinda Arden. And she's been called the most popular leader in New Zealand in the past 100 years. And she has a very well-defined set of values. And notice at the bottom of the list that I made here, collectivism. And that is very similar value to what First Peoples Fund carries in our collective spirit, community spirit.
Oh,
And
Ben?
yes,
Ben, we do have one quick question.
sure.
Somebody was asking, you brought up Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village, I believe is what was titled. And they were wondering what books or pieces of literature by Indigenous peoples would you recommend people looking into reading on values?
Okay, we have, I don't have the material at hand right now, but we have a resource list, Hillary, and it's in the First Peoples Fund library, and it refers to a whole lot of Native publications, some of which refer to value systems. And I know for sure that within that list is a document by a Navajo lady, a Dene lady, that has to do with Hojo and that value system. So, you know, that's one example. But I don't have any right at hand immediately that I can refer to. And I'm sorry about that. A lot of the materials, the books that have been presented with Native American authors have to do with how to do things, like how to be an artist, how to be you know, other professions and so on. But there aren't that many out there that talk specifically about value systems, but there are some out there. And Hillary, I will promise to get you that information that I have so that you can perhaps post it and make it available to the listeners here.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
Okay. All right. Another picture of the famous New Zealand leader who's gaining worldwide popularity as well. I mean, she did a tremendous job of getting the virus under control in New Zealand. And you can see her popularity for doing that. And she also promotes the indigenous values in Maori country. And this is a listing of some of the primary values that Prime Minister Ardern promotes. I won't try to pronounce the words, but you know, you can see what they are. And this is my good friend Hone Mahaka from New Zealand. And what the what the Prime Minister is attempting to do is to bring those values into government policy and acts of parliament so that they become a part of governance, because she is as much interested in the people's well-being as she is in the country's economic well-being. That's how important values are to her and to many in New Zealand. They seem to be kind of leading the world in pointing in that direction. We like to refer you to role models because everybody has role models in their lives. And usually the prominent role model is a mother or a grandmother or other relatives, but there are many other role models in your communities. I had a high school teacher that was a tremendous role model. She was a Native woman, one of the few Native women in the Bureau of Indian Affairs schools. And I was fortunate to have her as a teacher, tremendous role model. So you look at your role models and you find out, examine why you admire them is the way it works. Why do you admire these people as role models? What characteristics and what values do they represent? And once you determine that, you ask yourself, do I want to represent those same values? Do I want to be a role model myself, perhaps now or later in life, and influence younger people to try to emulate my values as well? And that's the way that the hand-me-down system works in tribal communities. of passing down these values into later generations, from role models on down. They're pretty consistent in that way among tribal communities throughout Turtle Island.
Oh, Ben?
Yes.
Yep. Question with what you just covered. How could Indigenous artists, entrepreneurs that are younger and not of the elder status start really focusing on becoming stronger in their values and ultimately a leader later on in their lives if they wanted to start now? Like, what would you recommend?
Well, you have to look at the individual values, and we'll get into that a little bit. But let's just take, for example, integrity, a very important value in your work as an artist and in your career as a small business person. Integrity is so important because as time goes on, you want to develop a reputation for a person who has integrity. You want people to say, she never lies, she never cheats, she never steals. You can take her word, her promise is a commitment. That's how you want people to feel about you. And that's a reputation that you build yourself. And the way I did it, I did not always have very decent values. As a youngster growing up, I did my share of stealing and lying. But one day I got up, and because my role model, my mother, she never ever lied in her life. She was a pillar of strength and dignity and compassion and really good values. So my role model, my mother, never lied. And for a long time, I felt bad about the fact that I did not have the same values as my mother, until I got up one day and I said, I am never going to lie again. I said that to myself. I was out in the hills by myself and contemplating what I was and what I wanted to be. And I just said, I'm never going to lie again. And so that was the beginning of my journey into having a full set of values in my life. And another value is that you would find in others is humility. My mother was the most humble person you could find as well. And so I decided I would be a very humble person. Here I am talking about myself, which sounds like it is not humility, but I'm trying to pass information on that will help you. I'm not sitting here trying to boast or anything like that. But I practiced humility, and I don't think you ever completely get there in a lifetime on being humble. When I look at my mother's Bible after she passed away, she had references in there to humility, paragraphs, words underlined, margin notes, all about humility. And that told me that even in her older age, she was still working on being a humble person. Now, in my tribe, we had practices that in older times, not so much anymore, that helped a person be more humble. In other words, if you accomplished a deed or an achievement or something extraordinary, it should be brought to the notice of the community. There was always someone who would do that for you. There was a spokesperson for you. So you did not have to get up and say, I did this or I did that. You allowed a spokesperson to do that. And that was a practice that promoted humility in the tribal people. And of course, there were exceptions to that. There were people who were boastful, and there's always that. But nevertheless, this custom or practice was designed to promote humility in my tribe in earlier times. And just taking a look at the values that we promote. A kindness is another one. You know, how difficult is it to try to be kind in everything that you do, to have compassion, to have love. And you know, going back to the list of Jacinda Arden's values, dignity. You know, once you move into a place in your life where you have mastered these values in the way that you live and think and work, then you can walk with dignity through life. As the Navajo people say, walk in beauty. You have this sense of fairness and justice. You have some inner strength that you can demonstrate. So that's how you go about finding the values and adopting them into your own self, into your own being. Let me refer you to Teresa Secord, our famous basket maker from Maine. This is a picture of Teresa when she was a baby. And she is surrounded here by her mother, her grandmother, and her great-grandmother. And the picture below that shows the great-grandmother, and she was a basket maker for her life. And Teresa didn't start out her career as a basket maker. She was educated as a geographer, but somehow the DNA took over. And I don't know how that works, but in her genetic makeup, she was a basket maker. And so she left geography and she went on to become a very well-known and highly respected basket maker, one of the best in the country. So that's how you can adopt values, just based upon your own, what you see within your own family. I did quite a lengthy thing here on Cherokee community values. And I used the example of the Eastern Band of Cherokees from Cherokee, North Carolina. We spent some time there. We conducted some Native artists professional development courses there. Teresa and I did, by the way. And I got to know the people very well there. So this was my firsthand knowledge of observing and documenting community values. And when you get in and start talking to people and you get them focused on values and kind of get them away from their everyday busy life, you come to realize that the values are a very foundation of how they live, and especially strong in this community. It's a rather small community in Cherokee, North Carolina, but the values that they carry are just so foundational and profound. And this has to do with, I told you about Tohi, balance and harmony. And they have this other one called Doogie, which is practiced by so many Cherokees, which is giving and sharing. And this is where they just volunteer without being asked to do things, you know, like chopping wood and harvesting crops and whatever they can do to help others. In other words, sacrificing for their own people. And dwelling on their past too, knowing their past, possessing this sense of identity as Cherokee people, and a sense of belonging that's very strong with them. And of course, I'm sure many other tribes throughout the United States are very similar, referring to children. And the Cherokee people are over there in the Bible Belt where spirituality is very strong. Religious faith is very strong. So a lot of focus on spirituality as well. Sense of humor is always good. This is Shanga Shore, one of the most admired people ever in Indian country. She passed away about 3 or 4 years ago, I guess it was. But she certainly gendered a lot of respect for the values that she carried and demonstrated through her life. And she too was a basket maker, as well as a lot of other things. So these are the individual values that the Cherokee people represent. And there are a lot more than that. than the 8 listed here. So I attempted to list a few more as well that you don't normally see on the universal lists, including things like gratitude. And on the left-hand side of the page, the caring, nurturing, and love. We usually don't find the expression of love on these lists of values, but it's certainly an important one. And then their collective spirit in the community that we talked about, which is a First Peoples Fund value, is amply demonstrated by the Cherokee people in their community through these community activities, the outdoor drama, the retail store called Koala Arts, the very excellent museum there, and then the Oglala Indian village where they dress and they act out the way that people did in earlier times, traditional times. So leading us back to our well-rounded artist, we want to get into a little bit about, we talked about values up to this point here. Values, which are sometimes called ethics, and principles, which are the guideposts in your career, your artist career, and then supplanted by or supported by qualities and skills. And we'll show you what those are. Character traits are a little bit different. Character traits are different than values. And just look at the list here on your left, and you can see how they differ from values. These are what make up your character and what help make you successful in your drive towards being, the best artist that you can be. This is Davy Arch from the Eastern Band of Cherokees as well. And then skills and abilities. And these skills are what you can learn yourself if you don't already have them. And I put at the top of the list listening, because I think that is so important, and it certainly has been in my career. And these are all skills that you can learn through taking courses and through practicing yourself. Developing these skills means practicing them in real life. The skill of observation, critical thinking, planning and organizing, communicating, public speaking, and the use of the good vocabulary. You can see from this list that these are things that you can learn in courses of different kind, whether they're college courses or any other kind of courses. And then there are the skills that you have as an artist. And some of that is based upon your own personal talent, and which is, we all often say that is God-given talent. But for many of you and many of us, that skill as an artist is developed through hard work and through diligence and practice. Being the best artist that you can be, having standards for your own work and striving to meet those standards. And yes, some of it is about income, money too, learning how to make money. And so we have to talk about the things that you can do with your artistic skills. And as in the case of someone like Teresa Secord, she's not all about the art sales. It's not all about creating and selling art, although that's a big part of Teresa's life and career. She also diversifies her talents and her knowledge to find other ways of creating some income. So she has these other entrepreneurial skills, such as teaching and training. She's a longtime trainer for First Peoples Fund, and a good one. So that brings some additional income to her. She is very good at getting grants, knowing how to get grants. And that's part of her teaching skills as well, is how to do that. Developing or finding residencies in different places, such as universities, art programs, and things like that. So those kinds of entrepreneurial pursuits can help you with your art career, and those are developed skills of teaching and training, sales through many different avenues, getting grants and getting residencies. So back to our little happy face here. That's how these different features of your personality, of your makeup as an artist, values, character traits, skills and abilities, all come together to make you this well-rounded artist or culture bearer. So I hope you have some questions for me. In addition to all that, you have the other parts of your life that you lead too. You have your home life, your family life, you have your recreation. You're trying to satisfy your spiritual needs if you believe in a creator, and then you have your friends and other obligations in your life. So that too makes up part of the well-rounded person. You end up being a multitasker in so many different ways, with not only your art career but your personal life as well. And then Ben Sherman comes along and asks you to adopt a bunch of values into your life, so just to further complicate your life. So there you go.
Well, thank you very much, Ben. We appreciate that input. And on my end, through Facebook Live, we do not have any new questions, and Zoom, there are no questions. So I think people that have been listening are just grateful and very thankful that you were able to share your wisdom and your knowledge with the rest of the community virtually. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Ben. Once I get that list of resources of literature and books by Indigenous artists or authors, excuse me, which are artists, right? With the written word, I can share that on our Facebook page with a list of resources with Indigenous authors that focus on values.
Okay. I enjoyed it, Hillary. Thank you very much for putting it together.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Ben. I always enjoy hanging out with you, even virtually.
Yeah. You take care now.
You too. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
bye.
you, everybody.